Hey there, Ryan the Ride Mechanic. So you're waiting in line, or maybe you've just gotten off the ride, you're somewhere close to the front, and the ride breaks down. And they say, we don't know how long it's going to be, but you're more than welcome to wait or come back. It's up to you. Then shortly you decide to wait, and then maintenance shows up. Maybe you're in a position where you're within earshot range of them. Sometimes I've been waiting at a ride in the front row next to the operator's panel, and then maintenance shows up there. And everyone always wants to know what's wrong with the ride. So I wanted to talk today about things that mechanics can and can't say while they're at a ride response call. So let's talk about that.
Now get ready. Here we go.
So things we can and can't say at a ride call. This is it's a really big topic, and I plan on spending a handful of minutes on it, but honestly, it doesn't do much justice because there's so many little nooks and crannies of this topic you can get through. It's hard to really say that you've covered it by just a small response. So the first thing that I always tell mechanics when they're heading out to a ride, newer mechanics in training, you don't have to tell the seasoned ones really because they understand it, is the first one is never give an estimated time that the ride will open back up. I've done it myself. I've gone up to a call that I've answered a handful of times, and it's always just a quick reset, and I gave that response. I'm like, oh, well, I'll have this ride back up in 10 minutes. Ride didn't open back up that day. The reason for that is that sometimes errors pop up on rides, and they're what we call nuisance errors. They're just errors you have to go reset and get the ride back up and running. And the ride did a thing in very specific set of sequence. Operators push buttons. Things just happened at the exact right time, and you got that error. Could be temperature related, weather related, something like that. But sometimes those same errors pop up and they're legitimate errors, in which case you're chasing a problem deeper in the machine. When you get to those errors, you go press the reset button on the machine and it won't reset because there's a problem. And sometimes those can take hours. I've had them even last days where we were trying to figure out what was wrong with the equipment. In a ride that's programmed with thousands of faults on the inside, it's not necessarily cut and dry to see exactly where that fault is coming from and how it manifests itself. Even when you're staring directly at the logic, it's not the easiest thing to do. So the bottom line from that is you just don't give a time on when the ride's going to open back up, because if the people want to wait 5-10 minutes, then cut their losses and leave, that's their deal. But I don't want to keep people around and say it's going to be quick and then keep them around the station for a half hour, 45 minutes until maybe we can't fix the problem and we give the dreaded response, clear the queue line, which means that's when operators say that it's going to be down for an extended period of time and everyone has to reverse their direction and leave the queue. People get really upset when that happens. I've been on the receiving end of that, and I get upset when that happens because you've just lost however much time you were in that line. You've just lost that out of your day. So we don't want to do that. So we just don't give ETAs. That's really the number one goal, is don't do that. One of the other problems that I run into sometimes is when you're heading up to the deck to reset a problem. A lot of times their ride is stopped, there's people on both trains, and close to the queue line exit, which is typically where your mechanics walk up, there's a growing number of people that are now concerned because their family member is on one of those two trains, and now they are very concerned about their family members. I've actually had people get in my way. I'm on my way to a ride call where the people are loaded, stuck on the ride, And they actually got in my way, and they stopped me from moving further, and they said, "We demand to know what's going on with this ride." And I was very confused by this, because even if I tell you what's going on with the ride, are you going to understand what happened to the ride? Because most people don't understand that. Put it in layman's terms, if you have an AC repair guy come in and fix your AC unit, if they tell you that the contactor was bad because the capacitor blew up, are you going to understand exactly what that meant for that piece of equipment? No, you're not. You're just going to say, okay, some broken parts, and you move along with your life. Well, it's the same exact thing with rides. These things aren't spelled out in layman's terms, so typically the ride faults are very complex. And one time, like this particular person, they stopped me from getting up the platform, so I stopped there for a minute and calmly explained the fault to them of what happened on the ride. And the fault for this particular one that I was going up to, and I've come across this before, and the lingo's very repetitive on a lot of faults. So I explained to them, I said, okay, when the train went by sensor S203 in segment number 6, neither incoming or outbound sensors read occupied when the section was given the command to reset, indicating that the values dropped below base levels and the photo eyes were non-obstructed. Something like that. And the people just stood there with a blank look on their face. And I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, I just told you what was wrong with the ride. This is what you demanded to know. You demanded to know this. And I told you. And they just stood there with a blank look on their face. And after a couple seconds, they're like, are you gonna fix it? And that's when I had to pull them back into reality. And I'm like, you were in my way to go get your kids off the ride. And then they finally moved out of my way. We don't like to leave people on rides for a long period of time because it causes panic, even though in that seat on that train is pretty much the safest place to be. But it still, for a lot of people, causes panic. So one thing we always have to do under ride calls is we have to stay cool, calm, and collected, even if the ride's not behaving the way we want it to. And realistically, that just raises your downtime. So what if you had to evacuate 2 trains and it took 30 minutes to clear the ride of the guests rather than it takes 15 minutes? Like, who cares? You get the ride back up and running, everyone's safe, or you don't get the ride back up and running, but you get the people off and everyone's safe. It's not a big deal. So that's one of the things that I really wanted to point in there. It's like, even if you were told the information, would you understand what that information is? And then another thing is that you only have this information in one brief little snippet of time. So if I told you that it was this particular fault, and then you went home that day and then you tried to Google that fault, nothing will come up. Nothing at all. If I said it was a 1069 error, you can Google it. Go ahead, 1069 error. We're probably going to come back with a handful of washer and dryer machines where companies publish their errors because their equipment messes up. But on custom built rides and equipment, you won't have any of those errors published ever. It's not going to happen. That is the park's business. What happened to the ride? That's the park's business. The ride's reliability and how it functions, that's the park's business. The ride's safety, that's the park's business. All that stuff is the park's business. The guests have no business knowing that information whatsoever. And all it would do is add confusion and cloud up, and then there'd be people at your favorite parks trying to start some sort of new, like, oh, I started a website. Every time somebody tells that it's a 1069 error, we're going to record it on this website. And do what with it? What are you going to do with that information? Okay, so now you know when the ride faults. Congratulations, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Why would you want to know that information? As a mechanic, I just need to know that it resets. And if it's the same thing, if I get a photo eye fault in a particular segment, and I go, okay, that's weird, I reset it, and I move on with my life. So if I get another photo eye fault, I typically go out to that segment and say, what is causing these photo eyes to fault? 9 times out of 10, it's not a bad photo eye, it's not a loose wire, it's not loose hardware or anything else. Most of the time, it's little critters running around rides. Yes, most of these rides, especially outdoors, are absolutely covered in spiders and everything else. Yeah, people don't want to think about that, but they're everywhere. These are big static steel pieces of equipment. Bugs like to nest in them everywhere. So what happens is we go up to the photo eye. Photo eye needs to be nice and clean. And if we get out there and I see spider webs on it, I go, oh man, there's a critter living on this one. So the fun part is you get to clean it up. And if you can't find the spider and evict it with extreme prejudice, then it's going to come back. It's just a matter of time. You can wipe the webs off of it, and the ride might run for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. Eventually that spider is going to go back out there, and it needs to make its web back to get food again. So it's going to start spinning its web, and then eventually, while the train's moving, it's going to cross that photo eye, and then the ride's going to shut down because it thinks there's a train in that block when there's not. It's just a spider. So little things like that. I've had spiders crawl on photo eyes. Photo eyes are great for downtime. Oh my gosh, so much downtime. I cringe at the amount of photo eyes that like Disney and those parks use, because oh my gosh, that must cause such havoc in their systems. Just must be amazing. But anyways, I've seen spiders crawl across photo eyes. I've seen birds fly across photo eyes, leaves from trees. If it's windy especially, you get a leaf that falls across the photo eye. And the block systems that watch these things and the safety systems, they're looking for information in milliseconds. So a small animal or a leaf briefly flashing across that photo eye is going to cause a fault. I guarantee it. So there's lots of stuff, and then there's other things like rain. When rain obscures a photo eye too much, it can cause it to fault. All these things. But again, that's the park's business. If the ride breaks down too much because it has photo eyes there, then the park should look at trying to fix that somehow. Word of advice, if you're ever asked to fix photo eyes with things getting in front of them, don't put tubes over them. Oh my gosh, don't do that. That's like a critter magnet. You put a little piece of PVC over there to shield it from sunlight or whatever else, and you'll just get nothing but spiders living in that thing. Never do that. Oh, such a bad idea. But necessary sometimes if you are having UV interference from the sun. Yes, the sun does cause photo eyes to fault as well. So, kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Another thing mechanics have to do that's very discretionary most of the time is they have to get parts to the rides and make repairs on rides. But again, this is information that we don't want to broadcast out to the park because people are already scared when they get in line for that ride. They think they're in danger. That's a real fear that most people can't really get over. There's always that element of fear that they are going to get hurt on rides. I tell people ride rides, they're fun. I go on them all the time. Like, I wouldn't stop riding rides. Go on them, they're fun. They have a great safety record. You want to get dangerous about something, try driving on the street. Oh my gosh, that is dangerous. It's crazy. But so we have to do things, and like we will have breakdowns where something will break. It's like, all right, well, we had a kid's roller coaster and the brake broke. Nothing really catastrophic like you would think. Oh my gosh, the brake broke. No, it was a flag plate on the side of the brake. So what we were doing is that the brake would open, and when the brake is open, it gives the ride the signal that it's okay to start the lift hill. So it doesn't overload the motor thinking that it's trying to drag the train through a closed brake. But the flag broke off. So we had to remove the entire brake skis and go back and make repairs to the flags on both sides, which is just a little tiny, it's just a little piece of steel that hangs off the side with a limit switch that's basically, it does this number when it triggers. So it's really nothing, but in those scenarios, we can't bring the welder down there in the middle of the day with the park in full operation, in full view of everybody. It's not that we're worried about people knowing that we're welding on a ride. That's not what we're worried about at all. Anyone that's familiar with repairs knows that you can't weld with people staring at it because it'll burn your eyeballs pretty good. We don't want to do that. So we want to minimize the risk, and then we'd have to take a diesel generator down there and fire that up to weld it as well. So we want to make sure everything is up at the shop. We can weld it there with the proper tools. We can use dye penetrant or mag particle testing afterwards to verify that the welds are proper, and then we can clean it and paint it and get it back to the way it was, and then go assemble it back on the ride. But that does mean that from time to time we're carrying parts through the park. Sometimes you know that that part is broken because it's in 2 pieces or something like that, and we don't like giving people that information, so we don't do that. We put those parts in plastic bags or shroud them in other things so people don't know that we're carrying broken parts around. To think that nothing would ever break in a park is absolutely stupid. Like, if you think nothing ever breaks in a park, oh man, I don't know what you're doing. But things break everywhere all the time. They break down. Amusement rides are built in such a way where we have safeties and redundancies and everything else, so that when things break, it doesn't really cause any other issues other than things stop working, which is typically not a big deal. I mean, on a roller coaster, you can break the wheels off of it, all the wheels, every single one of them, same time. You can remove them from the train and send the train over the hill. You know what will happen? It'll make a lot of noise, a lot of sparks, and it'll just come to a stop at the bottom. It'll stay on the track, won't come off. It's safety, it's built that way. The train physically cannot, the dimensions can't come off the track in that way. The carrier is built around the track. So there's lots of things like that. Hitch assemblies, where the hitch pivots, the manufacturer in most cases has come up with that if that hitch fails, there's safety cables, there's a secondary pin, there's a secondary link around. So even in the case of a hitch failing, there's something else that would catch it and keep it from coming apart. Are there freak incidences throughout the industry? Yes, there are. There's been a handful of cases where something has come completely undone. Forces of nature get in the way. Trees fall across tracks. Big problems like that. Weird stuff can happen. Absolutely. Can the same thing happen to a car? Sure. To an airplane? Yeah. Train? Yeah. Boat? Absolutely. Anything. So, just because you're having a fun day doesn't mean you're obscure from the rest of the world. It's a true fact, no matter what you do. So this has been kind of a long, drawn out, just nothing but talking video, but A lot of my videos tend to be that way, just because there's a lot to be said for these things. There's a lot of things that most places won't say. I will say I have no problem with it. I'm not throwing anybody underneath the bus. Once you think about these things and listen to what I'm talking about, these are pretty much just common sense, good and bad ideas. There's really not much to this stuff. Most things that parks won't say, it's just because it's quaint, plain and simple. It's none of your business. The park wants you to come in. They want you to be happy. They want you to leave happy. They want you to come back again so you can be happy again and then leave again. The park doesn't want you, the guest, to worry about if the equipment's running properly, or what the fault was on a piece of equipment, or if the brake brass is within spec, or if there's drive tires that are having chunking coming out of them. They don't want you to worry about that stuff. That should be the last thing on your mind. They want you to get in line, they want you to ride the ride, have fun, and then get off and buy some popcorn. That's what parks want. Anyways, probably gone on too long, but I'm Ryan the Ride Mechanic. Like and subscribe, let me know what you think. If you have ideas for future videos, let me know. Love to talk about it. Have a good day.